73% of the frame damage I see in my shop isn't from the crash itself. It's from the protection the owner bolted onto the bike right before the crash. I want you to let that sink in. You are paying good money, sometimes hundreds of dollars, to bolt a lever onto your engine block that is mathematically guaranteed to crack your frame or shatter your engine case in a minor slide. I have spent the last 2 decades with an easied out extractor in one hand and an oxyacetylene torch in the other, drilling out sheared-off bolts from ruined engine mounts because some marketing department convinced you that a shiny piece of CNC machined garbage was going to save your motorcycle. It is infuriating. You bring me a beautiful machine, totally ruined, and you hand me the piece of aftermarket trash that killed it, asking if I can weld it back together. The answer is usually no. Today I am tearing this incredibly corrupt aftermarket industry apart. I am going to expose the 5-frame slider brands that are quite literally robbing you blind, destroying your bikes, and laughing all the way to the bank. And then, because I don't just want to leave you angry, I am going to show you the only 2 brands on the face of the earth that actually understand metallurgy, physics, and sheer points. Let's talk about the fundamental physics of a motorcycle crash. Because apparently the engineers at these companies skipped that class. When your bike goes down, it carries a massive amount of kinetic energy. That energy has to go somewhere. It cannot just disappear. It either gets absorbed through friction as the bike slides across the asphalt, or it gets transferred instantly into the rigid structures of the motorcycle. The entire purpose of a frame slider is to provide a low-friction, highly abrasive point of contact that grinds away like a pencil eraser, bleeding off kinetic energy while keeping the expensive bits like your stator cover, your water pump, your radiator, and your frame off the ground. That is it. It is a sacrificial part. It is supposed to die so your bike can live. But the aftermarket industry looked at this simple, highly effective concept and realized they couldn't charge you $300 for a simple plastic puck. So they started innovating. And by innovating, I mean they started designing products that look incredible on Instagram, but act like a rigid pole vault the second they touch the pavement. They prioritize the showroom over the slide, and you are the one paying the ultimate price. Number 5 on the chopping block is Kemimoto. You know them. You have seen them flooding every search result on Amazon, eBay, and AliExpress. They are the $35 specials that look like a massive bargain when you've just dropped 10 grand on a new sport bike and your bank account is hurting. You think it is just a slider, how bad can it be? Here's the terrifying reality of Kemimoto frame sliders. The material they use for the actual slider is usually a low-grade, hollowed-out aluminum, or an extremely brittle recycled plastic that mimics the look of Delrin but possesses absolutely none of the structural properties. But the real crime here isn't the puck. It is the hardware. To hit that dirt cheap $35 price point, they are sourcing the absolute cheapest, softest mystery metal bolts from the lowest bidder in overseas factories. They have zero quality control regarding tensile strength or shear points. When you drop your bike, even at a standstill in your driveway or at a stoplight, the sheer force applied to that slider is immense. A proper bolt will bend slightly, or the puck will absorb the shock. The Kemimoto bolt just gives up. It snaps completely flush with the engine mount. So your $35 investment just failed to protect your fairings, and now you have a hardened steel stub stuck inside the threaded aluminum boss of your engine case. Do you know what a shop charges to extract a broken bolt from a recessed engine mount? You are looking at 3 to 4 hours of highly specialized labor, easily costing $300 to $500, assuming we don't have to completely drop the engine out of the frame just to get a drill directly aligned with the hole. You didn't save money. You bought a mechanical landmine waiting to go off. Coming in at number 4 is Crater. If Kemimoto is guilty of cheap materials, Crater is guilty of criminal, mind-boggling design. Have you seen these spiked frame sliders? Or the ones shaped like little knurled aluminum pegs with grooves machined into them? The engineers, and I use that term very loosely because I doubt they even own calculators, who designed these have fundamentally misunderstood what happens when a 500-pound machine hits the asphalt at 50 miles per hour. Asphalt is not a smooth, glassy surface. It is a jagged, incredibly abrasive cheese grater. When a bike goes down, you want it to slide smoothly so the energy dissipates gradually over time and distance. Crater loves to use billet aluminum for their sliders, often cutting aggressive shapes into them to look aggressive. Aluminum has an incredibly high coefficient of friction against asphalt compared to synthetic polymers. When an aluminum slider hits the road, it doesn't slide. It bites. It digs in violently. And when a frame slider digs into the road while the bike is moving, it instantly transforms into a pivot point. The forward momentum of the motorcycle hits that pivot, and the bike is catapulted into the air. This is how a simple, low-side slide that should have resulted in a scratched fairing and a bruised ego turns into a violently tumbling motorcycle that destroys the subframe, snaps the clip-ons, bends the forks, and totals the machine entirely. You are literally bolting a fulcrum to your motorcycle, begging the laws of physics to flip your bike end over end. Aluminum has absolutely no business acting as the primary friction surface on a frame slider. None whatsoever. Number 3 is TCMT, another brand masquerading as legitimate protection on the cheap. Their specific gimmick is that they often supply what looks like a massive, beefy puck. It looks like it could take a missile strike. You open the box and think you have bought a tank part. But here is the dirty secret about plastics in the aftermarket world. The undisputed motorcycle industry standard for protective sliders is polyoxymethylene, commonly known by the DuPont trade name Delrin. Delrin has insanely high tensile strength, high impact resistance, and a very low coefficient of friction. It slides beautifully and absorbs shock. It is also expensive to produce and machine. TCMT does not use high-quality Delrin. They use cheap, injection-molded ABS or heavily degraded recycled plastics with microscopic air voids hidden inside the casting. I have seen countless bikes come into the shop after a crash with TCMT sliders, and the puck hasn't ground down even a millimeter. It has completely shattered. Upon impact, the cheap plastic violently fractures like glass, instantly exposing the mounting bolt and the frame to the pavement. It offers absolutely zero abrasion resistance because it disintegrates the millisecond it is asked to do its job. Worse, because the plastic shatters instantly, the bare mounting bolt is often bent violently backward into the fairings, tearing through the expensive ABS plastic of the bodywork you were trying to protect in the first place. The bolt rips a massive hole in your cowls, and your engine covers grind away on the asphalt anyway. You are paying for a visual placebo that turns into shrapnel the moment you need it. Moving up the ladder of incompetence, we reach number 2, Puig. Now, I know I am going to make some people incredibly mad with this one, because Puig is a massive name in the industry. They make fantastic windscreens, great lever guards, and decent general accessories. But their pro line of frame sliders, the ones that cost north of $150, represent a staggering triumph of styling over survival. Puig decided that traditional round pucks were too boring, too utilitarian. So they designed these teardrop-shaped aerodynamic sliders with aggressive fins and rubber inserts. They look incredibly fast sitting still. The problem is pure geometry. A traditional cylindrical slider has no leading edge. It presents the exact same profile regardless of how the bike rotates or tumbles during a crash. It acts uniformly. The Puig aerodynamic sliders have a wide, elongated profile. When the bike slides, if the rear end swings out and the bike rotates even slightly, that wide aerodynamic edge catches on road seams, manhole covers, or rumble strips. Once it catches, the leverage applied to the mounting bracket is catastrophic. And speaking of brackets, Puig often uses incredibly rigid, thick steel or aluminum offset plates to route the slider out of the fairing without requiring you to drill holes in the plastic. This sounds great to a guy in his garage who doesn't want to cut his fairings. But when you crash, because that offset bracket is so incredibly rigid and the slider is elongated, the kinetic energy is bypassed completely past the slider and channeled directly into the cast frame spar. Instead of the bracket bending or the slider wearing down, the frame itself flexes, twists, and cracks. They have engineered a complex system that perfectly protects their proprietary slider at the exact expense of your motorcycle's chassis. It is backward engineering at its finest. And that brings us to the absolute worst offender in the entire industry. Number 1, Rizoma. I cannot state this clearly or loudly enough. Rizoma frame sliders are the single biggest scam in motorcycle protection today. You are paying upwards of $300, sometimes pushing $400 depending on the bike, for Italian-designed, CNC-machined billet aluminum jewelry. They are undeniably gorgeous. The anodizing is flawless. The machining tolerances are aerospace quality. They look like they belong in an art museum. And they will categorically, without a shadow of a doubt, destroy your motorcycle in a crash. Rizoma prioritizes aesthetics and branding above every single mechanical reality of a motorcycle accident. Their sliders are almost entirely rigid metal, sometimes featuring a tiny, utterly useless sliver of polymer on the very tip that burns through in the first 2 feet of a slide. When a bike equipped with Rizoma sliders hits the ground, there is zero shock absorption. Zero. The impact is instantly and violently transmitted directly into the engine block or the main frame spar. I recently had a client bring in a beautiful Ducati Panigale that had suffered a 20-mile-per-hour low side at a track day. A minor spill. Normally you would pick it up, dust it off, and ride home. The Rizoma slider did not bend. It did not grind down. Instead, the sheer, unyielding force of the impact punched the mounting boss completely out of the engine casing. A chunk of cast aluminum the size of my fist was missing from the engine block, leaking oil all over the deck. The engine was a total loss. A $5,000 replacement motor was required, all because a $300 protector refused to yield to the asphalt. Rizoma sells you a rigid battering ram pointed squarely at the most expensive component of your motorcycle. It is unconscionable that they market these as protection devices. The entire aftermarket industry has been systematically gaslighting you for years. They have convinced riders through clever marketing that paying more money for prettier, harder, more elaborate materials equals better protection. But physics does not give a damn about your anodized billet aluminum or your laser-etched logos. Physics demands sacrifice. A good frame slider must fundamentally be the weakest link in the chain of impact. It must absorb, it must wear, it must yield, and it must distribute kinetic force predictably. The frame and the engine block are the unyielding constants. Everything bolted to them for the purpose of protection must be explicitly designed to die. If your slider looks perfectly fine after a crash, but your frame is tweaked, the slider failed entirely. So, how do we actually fix this? How do you protect your expensive machine without bolting a mechanical liability to your chassis? You turn to the engineers, you turn to the people who build bikes for the track, where crashing isn't a vague possibility, it is an absolute certainty. There are only 2 brands I ever recommend to my clients. 2 brands that I trust implicitly, because I have seen them work in the real world, time and time again, saving bikes from massive destruction. The first brand that actually protects your engine is OES Accessories. If you go on any hardcore track day forum or club racing paddock, you will hear this name, and for incredibly good reason. OES does not care about looking pretty for your Instagram photos. They care about keeping your bike in one piece. For around $75 to $90, they deliver exactly what a frame slider should be. They use massive, solid blocks of high-density Delrin. Not hollowed out, not branded with flashy logos, just huge utilitarian chunks of impact-absorbing polymer. Where OES truly shines is their hardware selection. They meticulously source specific high-tensile hardware, deliberately selecting bolt grades that are strong enough to handle an initial high-speed impact, but will purposely yield and bend before the sheer force can crack a cast aluminum frame boss. Furthermore, OES avoids using offset brackets wherever physically possible. Offset brackets act as dangerous levers that multiply force against the frame. OES provides slightly different slider lengths for the left and right sides of the bike, custom cut for each model, to ensure direct, flush mounting to the strongest possible structural points on the engine cradle. It is brutally effective engineering. When you crash with OES, the Delrin grinds down smoothly, the bolt might bend 5 or 10 degrees, and your frame remains untouched. You unbolt the damaged slider, thread a new one in, and you are back on the road for $50. But if you want the absolute pinnacle of motorcycle protection, the undisputed gold standard that every single professional mechanic and crew chief respects, you buy Woodcraft Technologies. Woodcraft was founded by Eric Wood, a seasoned professional racer who got completely sick and tired of watching extremely expensive motorcycles get totaled by terrible aftermarket parts. Woodcraft sliders cost between $100 and $130, and the engineering behind them is nothing short of brilliant. Woodcraft looked at the fundamental, fatal flaw of every traditional frame slider on the market: the single central mounting bolt. On a standard slider, the mounting bolt goes straight through the center of the plastic puck and into the frame. When the bike slides, the puck wears down, and eventually the abrasive road grinds the head off the mounting bolt, or the impact bends the bolt inside the puck, permanently trapping the plastic. If you have ever tried to remove a bent frame slider with a ground-off, mangled bolt head, you know it is an absolute nightmare involving drills, screw extractors, and hours of swearing in the shop. Woodcraft solved this massive issue with a patented, genius two-piece design. They use a solid metal mounting base that bolts securely and independently to the frame. But the Delrin puck does not bolt through the center. Instead, the puck slips completely over the base, and it is secured perpendicularly by a small pin or a side-mounted bolt. I want you to truly appreciate the genius of this design. Because the securing hardware is mounted exactly perpendicular to the direction of the slide, it never touches the pavement. It never gets ground down. The Delrin puck can be 50% ground away, entirely deformed from a massive, high-speed slide, and you simply take an Allen key, undo the pristine side bolt, slide the ruined puck off the base, and slide a fresh replacement puck onto the undamaged mount. It takes 30 seconds. You don't even have to retorque the engine mount. It is a masterpiece of track-oriented design. But Woodcraft's brilliance doesn't stop there. They are absolutely fanatical about slider lengths. Many companies make their sliders excessively long to ensure they stick way past the fairings, tricking buyers into thinking longer means better protection. Woodcraft understands that a long slider acts as a massive lever, violently magnifying the twisting force on the frame when it catches on a curb or dirt. Woodcraft specifically designs their sliders to be as short as physically possible while still keeping the critical engine covers off the ground. They minimize the leverage, thereby explicitly protecting the frame from rotational torque. They engineer the entire assembly to act as the ultimate sacrificial node. They know exactly how much lateral force their base will take before it bends, and they make damn sure that bending threshold is thousands of pounds lower than the breaking point of your motorcycle's aluminum frame. The motorcycle aftermarket is a dangerous minefield of shiny garbage designed to separate you from your hard-earned money while actively putting your motorcycle at extreme risk. Stop buying CNC machined spikes that flip your bike. Stop buying aerodynamic teardrops that crack your chassis. Stop buying $35 Amazon specials made of hardened cheese that leave broken bolts in your engine block. Stop letting these massive companies use your engine case as a structural testing ground for their vanity projects. Your motorcycle is a precisely engineered, incredibly complex machine. Protect it with precisely engineered parts built by people who actually ride and crash. Get Woodcraft, get OES, and stop letting this deeply flawed industry rob you blind. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, and stop bolting jewelry to your